The rain had been falling for 3 days when Maren found the god. She had not been looking for one. She had been looking for the northern survey markers that the flood had swallowed somewhere between the ridge and the lower pasture, and she had been looking for them with the particular focused irritation of someone who understood exactly how much work was going to result from not finding them. The survey markers mattered. Without them, the land boundary records for the whole northern district were unverifiable, and unverifiable meant disputed, and disputed meant that the families who had been farming these valleys for 6 generations would spend the next 3 years in the kind of legal uncertainty that ate savings and broke people quietly from the inside. Maren was a land surveyor. She fixed broken boundaries. It was not glamorous work. It was necessary work, which she had decided long ago was better. The god was in the hollow beneath the old oak grove, the one the locals called the Drowned Grove because it sat in a natural depression that collected water every spring and held it through summer. In a normal year, the hollow was damp and dark and smelled of rot and old wood. In a year where 3 days of rain had followed 2 weeks of the heaviest flooding in living memory, the hollow was a small lake. The god was at the center of it. Maren stopped at the edge of the grove and stared. It was not what she had expected a god to look like, though she would not have been able to say before this moment what she had expected. It was large, not the sky-filling enormity of the stories, but large the way a very old tree is large, in a way that made the space around it feel differently arranged. Its form was roughly human in the broad architecture of it, but the details diverged in ways that suggested the human shape had been a reference point rather than a blueprint. Its skin, if that was the word, was the color and texture of the silt at the bottom of a long-standing river. Dark, layered, carrying the compression of time in visible strata. It was on its knees in the flooded hollow, which put its head at approximately the level of the oak canopy above. And it was shaking, not from cold. The tremor was deeper than cold. It moved through the whole structure of it in waves that started somewhere in the center and radiated outward, and each wave cost something. She could see that even from here. The face, if she was reading it correctly across the significant differences in its anatomy, was the face of something trying very hard to hold a position it was no longer certain it could hold. She should have left. Every reasonable part of her understood this. She was a land surveyor from the district office in Cairo. She had a government permit, a brass theodolite, and 37 survey stakes in her pack. She had absolutely no framework for this situation and no authority within it. She stepped into the water. It was cold. The specific cold of floodwater that has been moving for days and carries the temperature of the high ground it came from. It came to her knees immediately, and then to her waist as the hollow deepened, and she moved toward the oak trunks using them as handholds because the current even in this shallow depression was not nothing, and falling here would be embarrassing and also possibly dangerous. The god saw her when she was 12 meters away. Its eyes were the first thing she had a word for. They were gold. Not the metaphorical gold of stories, but the specific gold of the mineral itself, the way it looks when you find it raw in riverbed gravel, unpolished and heavy and completely itself. They fixed on her with an attention that was not threatening but was total, the way very large things pay attention when they notice something small moving in their vicinity. "Go back," it said. The voice did not come from its mouth. The voice came from the water around her, from the oak roots beneath her feet, from the air itself vibrating at a frequency just below what she could identify as sound. "Go back to the dry places. This is not safe for you." "I can see that," Maren said. The water was at her chest now, and her pack was getting wet, which meant her survey notes were getting wet, which was a problem she was going to have to address later. "Are you hurt?" The gold eyes stayed on her. "That is not a question you should be asking." "I'm asking it anyway." Something moved across its face. She could not read it. The vocabulary for what she was seeing did not exist in her experience, and she was working without a dictionary. She filed it as significant and kept moving. "I'm Maren Solis, District Land Surveyor, Northern Division." She reached the shallower area near its knees and stopped, which put her at a height where she had to tilt her head back to hold its gaze. "I know this is not a normal introduction." The shaking moved through it again. She watched it travel from the center outward and saw the effort it cost to absorb it, without showing more than it was already showing. Something is wrong with me, it said, in the way it said things. Not from a mouth. From everywhere. I do not know the shape of it. I have been this way since the rains began, and I do not know why. When did you last eat? Or whatever you do instead of eating? It looked at her for a long moment. A very long time ago. How long? The gold eyes moved away from her toward the flooded oak canopy, toward the gray sky above it. Longer than this grove has been here. Longer than the families in this valley have kept their boundaries. She had grown up in this valley. She knew how old those families were. Right, she said. Okay. She looked at the flooded hollow around them, at the rain still coming down, at the 3-day water that was not going anywhere soon. She looked back up at the god. I can't fix that today, but I can come back. Do not. The voice from the water and the roots in the air. Do not come back here. What you are seeing is not something you were meant to see. Maybe not, she said. But I saw it. She turned and walked back through the flooded hollow, using the oak trunks again as handholds. Her notes were wet. Her boots were ruined. She had not found a single survey marker. She thought about the shaking the whole walk home. She came back the next morning with 3 things. A waterproofed case for her notes, which she had stayed up until midnight making from oilcloth and wax, because she was going back either way and she might as well be practical about it. A large jar of rendered fat from the smokehouse because it was the densest caloric object she had access to, and she had no idea what a god ate, but she knew what things looked like when they had been going without for too long. And a coil of rope, because the water in the hollow was still chest high and she was not going to be able to work effectively if she had to use both hands for balance. The god was in the same position. The shaking was worse. She tied the rope to the largest oak at the hollow's edge and waded in, feeding it out behind her. You came back. I said I would. I told you not to. Yes. She reached the shallower area near its knees and set the jar on the surface of the water, which was not ideal but was what she had. I don't know if this helps. I don't know what helps. But I brought it because bringing nothing seemed worse. The gold eyes looked at the jar. They looked at her. What are you? I told you. Surveyor. I know what you said. I am asking what you are. She thought about this. The kind of person who finds broken things and tries to make them accurate again. She looked at the jar. Can you take it? A long pause. Then the god lowered one hand, enormous, each finger the length of her forearm, and the jar was gone, not quite taken, more like absorbed into the vicinity of its palm. She watched. After a moment, the shaking decreased. Not resolved, not fixed, but measurably less. It will not last, it said. I know. I'll bring more tomorrow. Why? She had been thinking about this since last night. Not the why of coming back, she understood that one, even if it was not fully articulable. The why she had been thinking about was different. Why was it here? Why like this? Why now? What happened to you? She asked instead of answering. A pause. The grove around them held the rain. I was diminished, it said finally. There were once many of us. Ones like me, ones different from me, all the kinds that keep the balance of the deep places, the water below the water, the ground below the ground. We were not gods in the way your stories describe. We were workers. Old workers in old systems, maintaining things that needed maintenance. And the others? Gone. The voice from everywhere was very quiet now. Faded or destroyed or simply ended. The way things end when the thing they were maintaining no longer exists to be maintained. I have held on longer than the rest because the deep water table beneath this valley is still intact. I am connected to it. But the connection has been weakening for centuries. You've been getting weaker for centuries. Yes. And no one knew. A sound, not language exactly. The water in the hollow shifted in a way that was not current, not wind, something older than either. Who would there be to know, it said. Maren did not tell anyone about the hollow for 19 days. On the first day, she went back with more rendered fat and a jar of river clay, which she had read somewhere was mineral dense in ways that might or might not translate across whatever biology applied here. She did not know if it would help. She brought it because bringing the right thing mattered more than bringing nothing, and she would not know what the right thing was until she tried things and observed outcomes. On the third day, she brought her notes and her theodolite because she had a job, and the god had told her its name, Veth. Not an announcement. A correction. She had referred to it as the god in her private notes, and it had read this somehow, in the way it seemed to read things that were not spoken aloud. And it had said, I have a name. Use it. She used it. She ran her surveys from the hollow's edge with Veth's presence in the water below her, and the occasional low resonance of its voice moving through the oak roots when it had something to say. It was not a comfortable arrangement. It was a functional one. What are you marking? Veth asked on the seventh day. Land boundaries. The flood moved them. The families in the valley need their boundaries confirmed so the legal records are accurate. Why do your kind put so much weight on the lines between things? Because the lines protect what's on either side of them. She set a survey stake and cited her next point. Without clear boundaries, the stronger party takes from the weaker one. The lines keep the taking from being legal. Veth was quiet for a moment. There is a boundary system beneath this valley, it said. Old lines, between the deep water table and the surface aquifers. If those lines collapse, the surface wells fail within 2 seasons. She looked up from her theodolite. Have you told anyone this? Who would I tell? She noted it in her waterproofed case. She did not say anything yet. On the 14th day, she brought Orvin. She had not planned to. Orvin was the oldest farmer in the North District, 73 years old, 4th generation on land his great-grandmother had staked out when the valley was still mostly forest. He had found her on the survey route and asked her directly what she was doing up at the Drowned Grove every morning, and she had weighed her options for approximately 4 seconds and told him. He had not said anything for a long time. Then he had put on his coat and followed her. He stopped at the edge of the hollow and looked. The water was lower now. The rain had stopped 6 days ago and the hollow was draining slowly. Veth was more visible, which meant more present, which meant the impact of seeing it for the first time was proportionally larger. Orvin stood at the edge for a long time. He did not speak. He was not a man who spoke before he had something to say. Can it hear me? He said finally. Yes. He looked at Veth. Veth looked back. My grandmother used to say the water in the north wells tasted different from the south wells, Orvin said. Not to Maren, to Veth. She said the north water had something in it, a weight, she couldn't name it. He paused. She called it old and good. The hollow was very still. I remember her, Veth said, from everywhere and from nowhere. The voice moved through the oak roots under Orvin's feet and he felt it. She saw him feel it. The slight adjustment in his stance. The stillness that came over him. She drew water from the north well for 52 years. I knew her by the sound of the bucket. Orvin said nothing for a long time, then he said, What do you need? Not what are you? Not what happened to you. What do you need? Maren had known Orvin for 6 years, and she understood, in this moment, exactly why 4 generations of his family had held the same land. Some people understood when they encountered something larger than themselves, that the first useful question was not about the nature of the thing, but about the condition of it. On the 23rd day she came to the hollow with Orvin and two of his sons and a woman named Bryn, who ran the grain collective and had the particular organizational capability of someone who had spent 30 years coordinating harvests across 11 farms. None of them said much at the edge of the hollow. They looked, and then they went about the work. They brought it all to the hollow. Not all at once, in installments, because Veth had told Maren that it needed time between each edition for what it was to integrate what it received, and pushing too fast would not speed recovery and might complicate it. She watched the recovery happen in increments so small that she had to keep notes to see the accumulation of them. She looked at her notes. She looked up at Veth. "Will you tell me?"